Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a great day today. This is another episode of the Autism Experience. And today on this show, we have Kelly Leslie, children's book author, and a former educator who's been working in that area for more than 30 years. And so to start off, I want to say, Kelly Leslie, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Oh, well, Ken, thank you so much for inviting me. And before we get into things, I just want to say I think you're an incredible role model and I love what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. I find it the same for you too. All right, to start off, I got to look at a little bit of what you do based on your Instagram. And I noticed that you started out as a teacher. For 30 years, you worked at various grade levels before becoming a vice principal. And now you're currently writing children's books, as well as doing some nonprofit work, I think, the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
And I wondered, if you could tell me more about your background in education, how you went from working in education to now doing all this and writing children's books.
Sure. It's been an incredible journey. If you had asked me aging myself here, it's got to be 34, 35 years ago when I entered the field of education. And then if you'd said to me back then, you know, you're going to be a teacher, but then you're going to be a vice principal, first you'll be a guidance counselor, love that role. Then you're going to be a vice principal, then you're going to be a principal of 3 different schools. I would have went, yeah, I don't think so. And then literally 4 years ago when I retired, if you had said to me, yeah, now you're going to write children's books, I'd say, well, yeah, okay. So it's been absolutely incredible. So I started teaching, like I said, well over 34 years ago, in Toronto with the Toronto School Board. And I became a teacher at the school I went to. So that was interesting because back in those days, teachers didn't move around a lot. And so a lot of my colleagues were my teachers when I was from grades 3 to 8. So that was fun. So I started my career and I spent 13 years, I believe. Sorry, my numbers might be off. In that school because, you know, like I said, we didn't move around a lot. But then I met my husband and we moved from I moved from Toronto to Oakville. So I was commuting, and the QEW was just as bad then as it is today. And the commute was fun. And it was even more fun when my daughters came along. So my first daughter wasn't that bad. She loved the car. So she would sleep all the way and then fine all the way home. My second daughter wasn't a fan of the car. So we had crying all the way in. I would work all day and then we had crying all the way home. So I said to my husband, I can't keep doing this. So we lived in Oakville and I applied to a position with the Peel District School Board. And one of my goals throughout that part of my career, I was taking what we call AQs or additional qualifications for teachers. And I took my guidance because one day I want to be a guidance counselor. Well, again, super fortunate. I interviewed for a guidance position in a middle school with the Peel District School Board and got it. Amazing experience. Absolutely loved being a guidance counselor because it's fabulous being a teacher and you can impact those students basically within your classroom. So what I learned through being a guidance counselor is you're farther reaching in terms of your impact and the amazing, sometimes sad situations that you got to deal with in that role. So that evolved. I had a principal at that time who kind of like tapped me on the shoulder and said, you know, I need an acting vice principal. What do you think? Again, I was like, oh, I hadn't really, that wasn't my path at the time, but I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I did. And then that evolved into 3.5 years in that role. And I took the courses and became official. And then I took the next step and I was principal in the last 12.5 years of my career. I had the pleasure of being a principal in 3 different schools. And in that time, I also taught those additional qualification courses. I taught special education, parts 1, 2, and specialists. And I also taught the principal qualification program to those who wanted to get into administration. And then I retired, and here I am now. And I don't know if you want me to get into all of that yet, or...
Oh, no, that's an excellent explanation of kind of how you got to here, though. I think that's really amazing. And I could sort of kind of connect in that sense because I did do a little bit of tutoring, which is not the same thing as being a teacher, but it does kind of put into perspective what's it like being a teacher, because I do remember at one point I was tutoring a class of 30 students. And while I wasn't the best at it, it did give me some perspective what teachers go through. I mean, I was grading papers. I mean, I was assisting my teacher grade papers, but I was doing a little bit of the grading myself. And then after I did a little bit of tutoring in high school for a year, I started moving more towards one-on-one tutoring. And so I could kind of see where our experience is sort of similar in that we worked in a large classroom setting and then we worked on a more individual level. And I find that they're both kind of complementary because I think as a teacher, you have that broader scope. You can impact many people at once. And then with doing one-on-one, there's that sort of that intimate connection that you get with dealing with one-on-one. You get to know the students more and in some ways kind of get to know their stories more. And it really brings into perspective how these two kind of work together. It's amazing.
Yeah. And, as an administrator, one of the absolute benefits, because like I said, in a classroom, you kind of have impact over those children that you get for that entire school year. And depending on how many subjects you teach, et cetera, it may be broader. But what I loved as an administrator, and especially as a principal, you get to impact the entire school. You get to impact all those students. And the last school that I retired from was the most rewarding. I had an amazing staff and the commitment of these individuals. And I was put into the school because we were going to amalgamate 2 schools. So the very first school I was in as a baby principal was closing down. So I was put into this last school because that school was going to come and join us. So I was kind of put in and going, okay, how are we going to make this meld? Because we're getting students who I had connections with, a lot of the families still, and new staff. So how are we going to make this all fit together so we're seamless? And I to this day, I always brag about what we did as a team. And it was just, when you have fabulous people like that, every staff member, even like everybody, the custodians, everybody, they were just incredible. And it's amazing what you can accomplish when everybody's on board that way, and it trickles down into the students. And it's so satisfying. So that's one of the real bonuses of being an administrator, in my opinion.
For sure. And in a sense, it really highlights, how everyone sort of plays an equal role in a student's experience, for sure. It reminded me of a leadership lesson I was learning, is that I think one of the mistakes of leadership is assuming one person is more important than the other, when it's not the case. Sure, a leader has a lot of responsibilities that concern everyone, but it's just, that doesn't make that person higher because everyone has an equal role. And I remember reading about this, and this leadership guy said something where he would tell every person in his staff, you are the most important person on this team. Or say, for example, they might go to a custodian and say, you are the most important person on the team. You make sure the bathrooms are clean so that way people have nice, beautiful bathrooms to go to. Or they go to a clerk saying, you are the most important person on the team. You make sure our student records are organized and neat so that way if parents want to know about their students' grades, they can access it. So I think just from looking at your experience and background, I think, would it be fair to say that having that experience as an educator and working as staff sort of gives you like a big picture of how this school works and how everything kind of connects?
Yeah, absolutely. You do get a much broader picture being in that role. And you're right, like it's all about value. It's all about valuing every single individual, and that is a core belief. And I think that's kind of what transpired into me creating the books, because it's a message of every single one of us has strengths, every single one of us. And I would tell this to the kids all the time, my own daughters included. And you know, I'm so, I just would love to get away, maybe it's a little Pollyanna of me, but away from the judgmental society and more to the accepting society. Like, can we just try to identify people's strengths more? And I haven't met anybody that doesn't have some sort of strength. And for some, you have to dig deeper for children, for students. But you know what? So what? It's there. And it's all about, that's what that you hit the nail on the head. It's just all about valuing everybody and recognizing that and celebrating that.
Absolutely. And that leads me to something I want to ask about too, because I think you said earlier that at some point you did work with special education students. And I was curious about, how did you end up discovering that path of working in special education and working with these students? Like, how did you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I guess hindsight's it really is 2020. So I can go back to my early days of teaching, and I had a one class. It was back in those days, there were no caps on class sizes, etc. So I had a grade 5-6 class of about, I think it was about 36 students, and we were in a portable. So that was an interesting time. And I think it was maybe my third year of teaching. So I had some really interesting and challenging individuals in that class. And I had one little guy who I figured out, when his ears started to go red, that means he's going to lose it. So I would put him right beside the door so he could, and we had a deal with each other. If you feel it, get up, go out the door, go outside, and just get the air that you need, etc. And I'll always remember my mother's words at that time, and I'm come home and I don't know how to get to them, and she would always say, you know what, they're not choosing to behave poorly. There's a reason. So peel the onion and find the reason. And that really impacted me, and it really made a difference in raising my own daughters. And so I think it's back then, even that, then I kind of became, this sounds like a bragging, and I'm not, but I just evolved into, I got more of the challenging students who were in my class. And I understood my administration decisions when I became an administrator, because there are definitely teachers that are just intuitive when it comes to understanding, getting past the layers. So that was kind of my affinity to. It was more of a challenging behaviors. Except no, I wouldn't say that. Anybody that had learning difficulties, I kind of, I'm like, I want to figure you out, and I want to work with you and support you. When I became an administrator, I didn't have the pleasure of working in specific classrooms. However, I always had students with individual education plans, and that ran the gamut. So when I became an administrator, though, my first school that I was principal of, we had 3 what they call, I don't like the terminology, but contained special education classes. So we had a classroom of students who were developmentally delayed. And then we had students who really struggled with expressive and receptive language. They were called communication classes. And again, I was so lucky to encounter an amazing staff. So I learned so much from the teaching teams, the teachers and their teaching assistants. together and like talk about, they were my role models. Talk about being able to bring out the best, and they were just so fantastic. They really, really were, and I could tell you success story after success story of these incredible students. So that really inspired me. And then my last placement, one of the things I remember telling my superintendent is, I wherever you put me, because I didn't know where I was going, etc. When I was being moved, I said, can you just please make sure that there is a high demographic of special education? And she did. So that was fantastic. So we had mainstream, a lot of students with autism, mainstream, and physical disability, you know, everything hard of hearing, visual impaired. And then I had also, for those students who it's just too overwhelming for them to be in the mainstream, I did have a classroom of primary students with autism and junior students with autism. And again, the staff in those classes continually to blow me away to this day. So again, I think I personally, I was just drawn in that direction, but also I was incredibly fortunate to meet a lot of amazing educators.
So it seems like it's something that you didn't quite plan, but it ended up being something that actually worked out for you and really got you curious, though. And I think to your point, I remember you said something earlier that really struck out to me, something about really peeling the layers to understand a child. I think that's really important. I think that's kind of a way of doing things that's sort of becoming more, prominent, especially with regards to the disability community for sure. Because I think I've come to understand that, oftentimes people always focus on what they see on the outside and then not always ask, okay, where is it coming from? Because I think that there's a reason why you see kids, especially autistic kids who have, let's say, sensory overload. You might see that as tantrum, but that tantrum is not irrational. It's coming from somewhere. Exactly. And I think part of a job of a teacher or a psychologist is to find that root cause and think of how can they get rid of that cause or find a way to help that child cope with it. Exactly. Like, what can they do? Exactly. I thought that's really interesting.
That you again, you hit it. But and that's my dream, that we become more tolerant and instead of jumping to a conclusion that's probably not accurate, what you're right, like what, and especially our nonverbal. I mean, they can't tell us, but there's something going on, and it could be maybe they have a toothache, but we don't know, right? So yeah, and like I said, I've had the pleasure of working with people that know how to do that, and it's not an easy task, but they just don't give up.
I wanted to take it, I think, back to the books that you've written, and one thing I want to ask about is that because you started out as working in the education system and then you transitioned to doing children's book, I wonder, what motivated you to consider writing children's books, after having worked in education for quite a while?
I was inspired by my grade 7 teacher. We had to write a story every week, and that was back in the days, you had to write foolscap and you had to do 2 foolscap. And he was very instrumental in inspiring me, because he just said, you're a very good writer. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. But it's something that always stuck in me. And again, see, that shows you the impact that teachers have. So when I, life was way too busy, working full time and 2 children, etc. So when I retired, that kind of came back to me, and I thought, I'm going to take a writing course. So I enrolled in a year-long children's writing course. And then one of my assignments to my amazing instructor was Hannah's Hugs, which was my very first children's picture book. And she's the one who kind of said, you know what, I think that you could make this into a children's picture book. But the premise behind all of this is I wanted to represent all those neurodiverse children that I worked with in print. I wanted them to see themselves in print, because through my experience anyways, reading a lot of picture books to classes, my own children, et cetera, there was, I feel, there is a lack of representation. And, if we're all saying we need to be, inclusive and accepting. Well, that, to me, that was something that's missing. So every children's picture book that I developed always focuses on a neurodiversity. So Hannah's hugs, Hannah has anxiety. And I used my own daughter kind of as my model around that, because she has anxiety. And then I did Believe in Bruno. And I knew, like, right away, because I do have, I don't know why, I just, with students and children with autism, I just have, my heart just melts. So I said, I have to do something with autism. So Bruno is a panda bear and he has autism. So I did that one. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to continue on with the Hannah series. And I did Hannah's Little Sis, and that is about cerebral palsy. And then I did Kevin's Struggle. I called it after my brother, recently passed, and that's about asthma. And then my most recent Hannah series is Riley the Riddler, and it's about ADHD. And Bruno 2, second in the Bruno series, is coming out very soon. I want to show you.
Definitely. And I think Bruno is probably your latest book thus far, other than the sequel book. Is that correct? Oh, okay. And I think that's really fascinating too, because when I grew up, I didn't really have those role models, so to speak, that were autistic, because I think one of the challenges that I had growing up was because, I don't know, as a child, I was surrounded by a lot of neurotypical people. I mean, there's nothing wrong for sure, but it's just that it kind of helps to have someone out there who understands what you're going through. And while the role models I had back then were not autistic, I mean, they did help, inspire me to live well, right? I felt that it would have been nice if there was someone who could walk me through the motions of being autistic and what is that like, though, because there are a lot of things I was struggling with that I had to figure out the hard way. And looking back, I realized that it would have helped a lot, and to really, because part of why I started my Instagram was because I wanted to share my stories as a child and as an adult, so that way, if there's anyone out there who used to be in that situation that I was in, it sort of tells them that they're not alone. There's someone that gets it and who's open to these conversations. And I think that there's been a lot of progress made, because now we have ADHD adults, autistic adults, everyone out now, and especially with social media, who have these big platforms where they talk about it. And I think it's amazing. And then it goes back to, I think, to your point, that I think some of the best examples that inspire people are what we see every day. And children's books is a medium to do that. So.
And kudos to you, because I love, like I said, I think you're an amazing role model, because you are providing a fabulous platform for everybody. For those that, like you said, hey, cool, I can do that. And for those who, we all benefit from learning. So I think it's and also a very educational platform that you're promoting, and kudos to you, because like you said, let's talk. Let's share. So, and again, my books, I know it's like this much of the cog to support, but it's twofold, because I want the neurodiverse students to see themselves in print, but I want the neurotypical students to hopefully understand and look at their classmates through the lens of strength, not the lens of deficit. And that's my hope as well.
And for sure. And I think that you do, I sense that you do kind of emphasize that point, because I found that I think for some of your books, or maybe all of them, you do have sort of a question section at the end of these books, where they give them the opportunity to reflect on the themes that you exhibit in these books and sort of think of how they can apply it in their life. I think that's amazing, because it reminds me a lot of those annotated children's books where you have author annotations and then some reflection questions. Sort of like a textbook, where they're not only seeing these themes come to life, but they're thinking about how they can apply it. Because I think that's how you tell if someone learns, by not just what they know, but how they apply it. And so I wanted to ask is, could you tell us more about, how you end up structuring that book that way, or is that something you had in mind?
Um, when I did my very first, as it was an assignment with Hannah's House, no, I can't say that I said, oh, I'm going to, put something at the end. I think it just, I think it's the teacher in me, that exactly what you said. How do I know? Like, that's great, you've heard a story, but how can we go deeper? And as exactly what you said, application is huge. So I toyed with the questions or activities at the back of the book, also as a support for educators who and parents who hopefully would read these stories to their children. And I wanted to provide a springboard, basically, to continue the conversation and dig deeper. And I have to tell you, I have had a lot of because my audience, I target kindergarten up to grade 3. I have had incredible submissions by students who have either chosen to share their understanding through pictures or words or both. It blows my mind. And I have had, I've had the pleasure of reading to a lot of classes virtually throughout this last school year. And the questions, especially from the kindergarten students, and you're never too young, right? That's why I wanted to start it at a young age, because my dream is, if we start shifting that paradigm from a very young age, then these guys, when they're adults, it'll be second nature. And guess what? They will hire, give jobs to very, very capable neurodiverse people. It'll be natural. You know what I mean? So that's why also I went with the young ones, because I thought, well, let's get them, starting on this learning path, this path of acceptance and recognizing and not judging, but seeing strengths. And let's evolve that.
And definitely, for sure. I just remembered yesterday I had a conversation with a friend about this, and I remember asking him, my friends were asking him, if you could work anywhere, if you could teach anywhere, what group would you teach? And he said kids, because they're at a point where they're still young, they're still growing, and they're developing. And I think that's a good place to really encourage these times, get them to start thinking about it.
Exactly. The application. Yep.
And that takes me to something that I think might be a challenge in that area. And one of it is the fact that there are a lot of children on the autism spectrum, or even children in general with learning disabilities, dealing with what they feel is alienation, because some students may be bullied, left out. There are also mental health challenges too, regards to that. And it's a very challenging barrier for teachers, educators, and a lot of people, just to really, in pursuit of creating a more inclusive space for all students. And I wonder is, what are some ways in which educators or even school faculty, based on your experience, working in education, what are some ways in which they could help address these social disparities or challenges, and still be able to keep pushing for that inclusive and understanding society we all want to achieve?
That's a huge question. There definitely is not a magic bullet that can address it. because what we're asking of people basically is, for some, is a paradigm shift in attitude, and how, we have to check our own biases. And there are some, great courses, etc., offered through boards of education about how to do that. But, what your question asks is, how do we internally motivate people to truly bring inclusion? And as you said, how do we you have to spread the education to neurotypical, in my opinion. And I know it's possible, and the reason I know it's possible, because I have literally seen it with my own eyes. I go back to that developmentally delayed classroom that I first had in my first school, and I have seen it. I have seen, though, that education team. There was a classroom teacher and 3 teaching assistants, and that team, honestly, because they were persistent and they didn't take no for an answer, they integrated, because they came up with these fantastic programs, and they integrated those students into that school so well that I literally had parents come to me throughout the years that I was there, and parents of neurotypical students, and so thankful that this is what was being done, because parents would say, I had Johnny, I'm just saying the name, at a birthday party the other day, and there was a child, a neurodiverse child, and he was having a tough time. And he was, maybe it was too overwhelming for him sensory wise, and so he was having a meltdown. And my son, walked right up to him and helped him. It was able to calm him down and distracted him, and started playing. And she said, that's because that's what you guys do here every day. So I know it's possible, but I don't have an easy answer as to how we attain that. Like I said, these books, I'm hoping that will just start the process. And don't get me wrong, there are educators out there that are just wired that way. Absolutely just. But that I could say that's a reflection of society, though. And as an administrator, and I have many amazing colleagues who I know would do this anyways, like zero tolerance for any type of social exclusion or bullying, or that's got to be a thing in every single school. And parents who have neurodiverse, they need to know that their children are going to be safe, and that the children are going to be welcomed and included. And so to me, that's a no-brainer. That's just non-negotiable. How do we spread that? I think we, as a society, we have definitely come a long way, but I also think we still have quite a journey ahead of us. Doesn't answer your question exactly, but that's a big one.
Definitely, for sure. I mean, I understand, though. It's not a very easy thing to address, because it's such a very complicated issue, for sure. And there's so many layers to it, too. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that I think that really, to address these challenges, I think everyone has sort of an equal part to play in it. I think parents do, teachers. It's not something that's pushed on one person. I think it's something that goes to everywhere. Like, the more as we started talking about this, though, for sure, because I think because it is something that is bound to happen, to a lot of people, and It's not an easy thing to really deal with, though, for sure, and it's frightening. But I do think that there are ways to really address it too, because I think at the end of the day, even though there's definitely a struggle, I think the most important thing that a child needs to know is that they're loved and they're supported no matter what hardship they face. And sort of like that example you gave when you talked about how you had that student who saw a student who had a tantrum and was helped to calm him down. It reminded me of a situation when I think in my special education class where what my teacher would do is that she would have students from another class, mainstream class, come in to sort of be guides or so for the students where they would play games with them, visit. And I thought that was really amazing. And my sister did that too. This was how she was exposed to neurodivergent students. And in a sense, kind of understanding me better. Yeah. And I remember there was a moment when I think this autistic student was laughing at something. I mean, apparently he was laughing at an idea he had in his head, but from the outside, it seemed like he was laughing at nothing. And I remember one of the neurotypical students who was sitting there, apparently she was taking a test, just looked at him, gave that funny look, and then the special education teacher just went up to her and said, "Oh, don't worry, everything's fine. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's no shame in being neurodivergent. He's a smart boy, he's responsible, and he's a happy child. He's just trying to have fun." And I think that probably, I mean, it's not the only solution, but I think it is a very powerful way to really, really foster inclusion and inclusivity just by having that direct experience too. Kind of coaching through that.
Having that direct experience and having somebody there to demystify the behavior. And you're right. And it's just like, oh, okay, cool. He's probably watching a cartoon in his head and he's loving it. I wish we could do that. That'd be cool. And kind of just make it not such a big deal. Right? It's just like, yeah, that's cool. We all have things that we're not so good at, and that's what I would always tell students that were newly diagnosed with a learning disability or something to that respect. And it's how we're wired, and we're wired differently. That's okay. And I would share stories about, to this day, I cannot cook. I have tried, and nope. So it's just we all have our things, and that's what makes us similar. So we should all kind of get that. You're not great at this, that's cool. I'm not great at this, but you're great at that. I'm great at this, so we're a lot more alike. If we could just take away the knee-jerk judgments. And I don't know how to do that. I wish I did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot. And it's interesting too, because I think that at the end of the day, I think our differences are what makes us unique and special. Because while I do have sensory overload, for example, it does give me this sort of ability to be attention to detail, which is a useful skill. There are strengths in any kind of situation. And I think that's something that you do emphasize a lot in your books and what you do and what you tell people out there. Sure. And I think one of the ways you do emphasize that is through this organization, Believe Beyond Bounds, I believe. And this organization that you've co-founded, and that I was wondering if you could sort of dive more into it, and what are the things that you hope to achieve with this organization?
Okay, so Believe Beyond Bounds started sitting by the lake. It was literally, I think it was 2 months after my retirement. And friends and I had gone to the Invictus Games closing ceremonies. You want to be inspired? Go to one of those. It was absolutely incredible. So the following day, we were sitting by the lake, and my friend Joyce and I were talking about that was just unbelievable. And talk about celebrating abilities and strengths, and oh my goodness. So we veered off into I was kind of sharing, I met her, she was on my staff for that last school I was in, and she's one of those intuitive people I was talking about. And I was kind of saying, she's like, well, so what's next? And I said, oh, I don't know, sleep. And I said, but I feel like I am not finished. And my last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years before I retired, I was kind of trying to get something going for students, for neurodiverse students, to be able to participate, because all these years I would send off my track and field team, good luck, away you go, and I would send off this team to that. But it was my neurotypical. And so I always wanted to create something. And within our board, not to a huge degree, we didn't have necessarily a track and field event for neurodiverse. So Joyce and I sat there, and basically we came up with this idea. And we thought, okay, we're going to call this organization Believe Beyond Bounds. And it's kind of twofold. She is a gifted photographer. So something that she has done, and I'm just there to help because she's the pro, is paint our children as superheroes. And so we had some neurodiverse children come to a photo shoot. And we had, again, wonderful people supporting us and donating costumes. So Batman and Superman. And she would do a photo shoot. And I think it was Black's Photography she partnered with, and they would give the photos for free to the parents. So there was that aspect, I believe, Beyond Bounds. And then what parachuted off of Believe Beyond Bounds is the Triple B Games. So that's when we approached the Peel Board and had some very open-minded superintendents. And we said, we want to start small, and we want to have again, I use the term loosely, track and field event for neurodiverse students from kindergarten up to grade 6. We started with, and we also started with, we want to start with students who are identified with autism, and created this day. And we want parents to be there because they don't get that chance. And so we involved parents were there. And we got a class, that contained class in a high school, made t-shirts for all of our athletes. And we got a fantastic, a place where I used to get all my trophies for the graduation trophies engraved. This lovely, lovely lady, she donated medals. So our athletes had t-shirts, they got medals at the end of the day. The parents would put the medals on them. And it was just amazing, amazing. So we were able to do it for 2 years, and then COVID hit. But I have to say, our second year, Special Olympics has helped us with the equipment that we need. And cadets, those that are in training to go into the police force, they were there as volunteers. So I foresee it, we want to expand. But that's what the Triple B means.
Absolutely. It reminds me of someone that I think that you featured on your Instagram. His name is Ben Blumont. That one person. Yeah, I had him on my show my last episode, and I think he was featured on your show too. And I think this hearing you talk about it just got me to connect with it, because I think you did feature him, and I thought it was really amazing because, I mean, the fact that he's autistic, but also he's doing these 800-meter dashes and all that. I bet it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, you might be looking at yourself like, wow, that could be me. Like, I can do anything, He's autistic, but he's still doing it.
Yeah, fast.
For sure. And to be able to have that experience for yourself, I think that really means a lot to someone. Yeah, and really helps sort of expand the plate of opportunities, though, for sure, because that way it's not just neurotypicals getting this; it's also neurodivergent students too, giving them opportunity to partake in that.
Exactly. And one of the heartwarming stories that have come out of that is we had one parent tell us that her daughter refused to take the medal off. Just nope, not taking it, like slept with it, everything. And we had another parent say, Mom, I'm an athlete just like his sister. So, like, there we go. That's what it's all about. How they see themselves and amazing themselves. Like, I did it. Like, yeah, you're so capable.
And I find that when you give people that opportunity, it will inspire them to go even farther. Like telling them that dream can happen, and when you get opportunity, it pushes them closer to making that happen, and even making it happen. Like telling them that things are possible no matter what.
Exactly.
It's powerful. I agree with that. And I think, we're cutting close to the end, but I do want to ask you just two more questions, and one of them is, where can listeners best reach you and contact you and follow your work, if they want to keep following you with you?
Sure. Well, at K Leslie Books is our Instagram and Twitter. But to personally contact me, and please do, it's klesliebooks@gmail.com. If anybody wants to email me, and that's where teachers and students have been sending their work, because we like to post it on our social media and on my website. And the website also for educators, there's a lot of curriculum related activities you can download for free. And I have to get my glasses on here because it's a little bit of a longer. So the website is https sites.google.com/view and /K Leslie Books. So those are the areas. So but social media wise, it's basically Instagram, Twitter, and the website, and then my email.
For sure. That's great. For any of you listening out there, I'll definitely put it down in the show notes, so that way all of you can access it if you want to check out her work and to really follow up and contact her if you all are interested. So I'll definitely do that. And I think the last question, I like to save the best for last, is what message or what would you like autistic kids, parents, and advocates to take away from this conversation?
My message is that I'm trying. I'm in your corner, and I continue to, and I will continue to try to remove these barriers and help individuals see your children or family members in the autism community, see their strengths and their capabilities. And you're an example. So that is, I don't have to tell the parents about the strengths of the children because they know. Well, I guess my message is I'm trying. We are trying to show the strengths of what you already know about your child to everybody else, and be accepting of differences and through kindness and inclusion. And we all need that. That doesn't necessarily just our neurodiverse. It's we all could benefit from learning more about each other and being more accepting.
Definitely.
Hope that answered your question.
Oh no, that's a great answer. I do appreciate it. So, all right. So I think we're almost near the end of our time. I want to say thank you so much for coming onto this show. It definitely gave me a lot to really think about, and in terms of neurodiversity, how we work towards it, and really about the power of examples, especially through children's books, and really impacting the way someone sees the world and understands people and all that. So I want to say thank you so much for coming onto the show. And for anyone listening, I will definitely, again, put down all Instagram details where you can reach out to Kate Leslie. I also, her website, her email, I'll put that down in the show notes if you're all interested and all that stuff. And before I go, I want to ask, is there anything else that I'm missing out on, or I missed, or anything else that you want to?
No, I mean, you covered everything. I hope I was able to succinctly cover things for you, but I want to say thank you for this opportunity. I think we align quite nicely with our philosophies about the whole inclusion and acceptance topic. So I so appreciate you asking me to come on here and have this conversation with you. So thank you.
Appreciate it. So again, thank you for coming on. Thank you all listeners for tuning into this show. And I hope you all have a great and wonderful Saturday morning. Take care. Hey, thank you all for listening to this podcast. If you guys like this channel, check out and subscribe to this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, wherever you all get your podcasts. For social media, you can follow me at The Autism Experience on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you all for listening. Stay tuned for more from The Autism Experience.